I've made 2 long distance moves myself, once without kids, once with kids, and I've even flown a cat from one province to another. And it's just a lot. It's literally almost like playing Tetris. You need to get one thing done before you can do the next thing, but before you do that, you have to actually do something else first. There are so many steps involved, and the list literally feels like it's never ending, which is exactly why all of my clients are given a relocation guide in the first place. And today I'm actually going to walk you through it. My name's Rebecca. I'm a real estate agent here in Ottawa, and I help families and first-time homebuyers move here using both professional experiences and personal experiences. So if Ottawa is a move that you're considering and you're kind of feeling a little bit stuck on where to begin, this is probably a great place to start. Before boxes, before timelines, before anything else, you have to figure out how you're going to move your items from point A to point B. And unfortunately, it's not super simple. You're not only narrowing down which company to use, but you're also deciding what type of service makes the most sense. There's a few different options that you can choose from. There's the traditional movers, a pod, or moving everything yourself. Each option is obviously going to come with its own list of pros and cons. So before you even think about packing or dates or anything else, this part is going to take a little bit of time. So most moving companies don't really give you a clear quote right away. You can't just go online, type in a few things and get a quote immediately. Instead, they're going to want to book a call or sometimes even an in-person visit. I've also seen them have video calls where you walk around and show them everything that you have. And you'll probably start getting a lot of emails and follow-ups after this. This is where it can get confusing quickly because some companies have sister companies. They look different, but they're actually really connected. So if one company has really poor reviews, there's a good chance that the others do too. That's why in the guide, I really stress checking reviews carefully. And it's not just for the rating. I don't really care too much about that, but it's the actual comments and the complaints that you can see on the Better Business Bureau, for example. You can start to see a little bit of a trend about what the most common complaints are and how they've handled them. Helps you narrow it down. Keep notes as you go because you're going to forget who it is that you spoke to, what they quoted, and what was included. And when you're talking to multiple companies, it all starts to kind of blend together and it's very, very easy to forget details. You will also notice quotes can vary quite a bit. For example, if you're taking a move from BC to Ontario, you can see quotes from as low as, $2,000, $3,000 all the way up to $10,000. In the guide, there's actually a quote that will actually show you just how detailed some of these breakdowns can be. You'll see charges for things like transportation, fuel, labor, insurance, and sometimes extra fees that aren't really obvious at first. Ask what's based on weight, ask what's estimated, and ask what could change later. Even small adjustments like correcting the estimated value of your belongings can make a difference in a cost. Let's say, for example, a moving company is going to say, well, I'll transport your belongings for you. I'm estimating that they're worth about $10,000. And so what they're going to do is they're going to tack on insurance charge for that $10,000 worth of value. Now, if you know that the belongings that you're transporting are nowhere near equal to that value, you can ask them to reduce that amount because then you don't need to pay for the $10,000 value that you don't actually have. You'd be surprised by how much that can actually bring down the cost. If you have the flexibility, of course, moving outside of peak summer season can really help with the overall cost. Summer is obviously when movers are the busiest, so prices are going to be higher. They're really going to milk that at that time. Fall and spring would give you more options and a little bit more breathing room. Once you start narrowing down the how and the when, the move begins to feel a little bit more structured. The next part of the guide is about choosing what type of moving service is actually going to make sense for you. There isn't one right option. It really just depends on your budget, your timeline, and how hands-on it is that you want to be. Some people choose to rent a U-Haul. It can be more affordable and it gives you full control over your schedule, but it also means that you're responsible for driving a large vehicle, loading everything, securing it properly, and dealing with unexpected costs like fuel, insurance, or extensions. Now, if you are driving a long distance, let's say, for example, from BC to Ontario with a U-Haul and you're making stops at hotels, you want to be very careful about where you park the U-Haul. So try to park in a place that has a lot of cameras, a lot of lights, and see if you can reverse park as well. That way it's not so easy to break into the vehicle. Now, if you choose to go with a traditional mover, they are more hands-on. So they'll handle the heavy lifting, sometimes even the boxing, the loading, and they know how to secure the items properly. The trade-off with that is that the schedule is a little bit more rigid and delivery dates are often estimates rather than guarantees. One thing to note is your belongings may also be transferred between trucks along the way. Sometimes they'll swap the driver or they'll do a transload at a warehouse, which it's likely that your belongings will get lost, misplaced, stolen. It can happen, unfortunately. Another option is using portable storage containers. They are called pods. So these can work well if your timing is a little bit more flexible and you need storage in between your homes. So you can load and unload at your own pace, but you'll need to plan ahead for things like parking permits and, of course, access for delivery trucks. Space can also be just a little bit more limited, which sometimes means needing more than one container. So cost is definitely a part of the decision, but it's not the only factor. Each option is obviously going to come with its own risk and its own trade-offs, but honestly, a lot of the stress comes from really just not knowing what questions to ask, which is why this section of the guide really breaks it down side by side. Once you've figured out how you're moving, the next thing is to plan for the cost and not just the obvious ones. Moving expenses go well beyond just the truck itself. So in the guide, for example, I list out the type of expenses people often forget to budget for. It's very easy to overlook the cost of storage fees if your timing doesn't line up perfectly, utility hookup and disconnection fees, vehicle registration or inspection costs, things like that. Now, if you're moving for work, some of these expenses may be deductible, but only if you keep those receipts. So this includes things like packing supplies, storage, travel, and sometimes even closing costs if you're buying a home. Keeping everything nice and organized from the start makes this much easier later on. Another part I want to touch on here is decluttering. Most long distance movers are going to charge you by weight. So it does make sense to go through your things and get rid of the items that you don't actually use anymore. But that doesn't mean that you need to sell everything. So in the guide, I talk about weighing the cost of moving certain items versus replacing them. Things like sofas, mattresses, bed frames, dining furnitures, and TVs can be expensive to replace. So sometimes it makes more sense to move these items and sell smaller or unused things instead, like plants, which by the way, you can't take on the moving trucks, books, old electronics, bulky furniture that won't really fit in your new space maybe. If you're driving to your new home, there are also things that you don't want packed away inside the moving truck. So things like personal documents, medication, basic kitchen items so that you have something to cook with when you arrive, some tools for cleaning or putting things together, and weather appropriate clothing. Now, if you have kids, you're really going to want to bring some familiar items and comfort things that can make those first few days a little bit easier. The goal is to arrive and be able to function right away, even if everything else shows up later. There are also additional expenses that tend to pop up unexpectedly, and this could be things like parking permits for your moving trucks, pet relocation, storage fees, driver's license updates, internet transfer fees, you get the idea. So I do have a full list of these things on the guide, and they're not there to overwhelm you. They're actually there to help you plan ahead instead of being surprised afterwards. The last section includes smaller but helpful tips like gathering medical records, refilling prescriptions, labeling hardware for furniture, and measuring doorways in your new home before moving large items. Everything I've walked through is laid out step by step in the relocation guide. So if you want a copy, it's linked below so you can go through it at your own pace. And if you're thinking about making a move to Ottawa and you want help figuring out how this applies to you and your situation, you can always reach out to me and we can talk it through.